Chapter 1. Meaningless. Have you ever seen a dragon fight? A legendary one. Not those overgrown lizards with no wings or those with muddled bloodlines. Vacuse has never seen one fight either because the legendary dragons, the true ancient beasts, have not been seen in the world for centuries. Until now. Finally, my family will be great again. After hundreds of years, we will have a true dragon, and we will rule the sky once more, shouted Vacuse Vorrakyn, the head of the Vorrakyn family, the only family in the world with the dragon pathway. Vacuse wanted to shout at him. He wanted to stand and cut his head with his sword, but he was powerless, held down by a spear that was driven through his chest and into the ground. His head was filled with pain that made everything fuzzy. The smell of his own blood felt like rusted metal in his mouth, and the nearby groans of pain from the others made his ears ache. Surrounding him in a circle were others like him, pinned down by a spear to the chest directly on the magical formation drawn into the ground. All of them, including Vacuse, were children of Drenver, the illegitimate children, all of them thrown away like disposables after they had dedicated their lives to the family. Their beasts, their bounds, were already butchered, all in a bid to summon a true dragon and bound it into the soul space of the family head. It was a known fact that the Vorrakyn are the family of dragons. They ruled the sky and dominated the land with their terrifying powers, both dragons and soul-bearers. Their soul-bearers were known as Dragon Riders. But all that was in the past. In the last 800 years, none of the Vorrakyn could bound a true dragon to them. Selves. They could only bound with drake, wyvern, and such. It led to their sharp decline. Their territory was slowly reduced until they were pushed to the far edge of the empire. Only their title of Grand Duke remained. What's a title that couldn't be backed by power? But now, the family head had called a true dragon. It should be a thing to celebrate, a joyous occasion. But Vacuse couldn't care less. It was his blood that was used to power the magic formation. It was his pain, and it was his heart that got torn by betrayal. His life was a very wretched and useless thing. He was born because his father simply wanted to spread his seed as much as possible just so he could birth a child capable of bounding a dragon. But they all failed. They turned to his disappointment, and he let them know it. He turned them into mindless dogs that only obey orders, and he used them as his tools. Vacuse really didn't mind because he really wanted the family to be great again. He dedicated his life to that without complaints. He fought and bled for it. But as he lay there, his blood and life dripping away, he realized that his 34 years of life was indeed meaningless. For the first time in his life, he wanted something. He felt a great rush of anger. That made his left arm, the one cut short at the elbow since he was a kid, throb painfully. He smiled, and his teeth were bloody. Just like a dog that turned on its owner. He wanted to kill his father and be the one to raise Vorrakyn to its greatest height. For the first time in his life, he wanted. But so what? He was lying on the ground, pinned to the floor with his life draining away, and his beast, a lindworm, was dead, their bound cut away. Bang! Suddenly the ground shook, and large cracks appeared all around them as if the earth itself was crumbling under the might of a dragon. The space above Drenver brightened with silver light, and it cracked. Empty space cracked like mirrors as the great beast brought its snout out, quickly followed by its body. Vacuse forgot his pains instantly, and his breath, the last of the breath he had, stuck in his throat. His eyes widened in wonder and terror. Had he ever seen anything so ugly and beautiful at the same time? The dragon was huge, a walking mountain with a head that was big enough to swallow everyone in their hole. Its eyes were slitted, but it was the scales that were pure silver, and they were the most beautiful thing on its body. But one thing that surprised Vacuse most was its presence. There was nothing noble in it. The dragon was pure destruction and hatred, and its eyes burned with the light to cause chaos. Its lips curled back as its eyes swept over them, fury gathering at its brows. Low growls that made it seem as if their bones were being rubbed together came out of its mouth. They didn't understand what it was saying. Only its soul-bearer could, but they felt the irritation and disgust rolling off it. What Drenver used was a forbidden technique of the family that forced a dragon to appear. But what happens when the dragon finally arrives? Vacuse didn't know what the man was thinking, but he mustn't have thought far about what would happen when the dragon arrived. In the brief silence that followed, Vacuse began to laugh. His chest flared with pain, and his life drained faster, but the look on Drenvar's face wasn't something he was going to pass on. Drenvar pressed his hand to the red wyvern beside him, and his eyes glowed as he used dominance. His bound beast, the wyvern, raised its head and roared. The aura around them exploded, an intense sting of rippling heat and shockwave. The power that had sent Vacuse and his beast smack into the ground. More times than he could count was sent at the dragon. Drenvar and his beast were the most powerful in the family, and they rubbed that fact in the face of everyone. And yet their power was a splash against the dragon. Vacuse became jealous immediately, envy ran hot in his blood. As he began to imagine the kind of power, the type that he could use to walk his own path and plan his own destiny. He wished he could have done that with his life, to do as he wanted, to try and lift his family himself instead of just following Drenvar's orders. The dragon looked at them, dismissed them as unimportant, and then it spread its wings. That seems to stretch to impossible length, that covered the moon and cast a long shadow. Then the dragon roared. It roared. A sound that shattered their ears and the ground they were standing on. A flash of light followed, and the dragon's body was covered in white lightning that flowed like liquid between its silver scales. The sky above them turned to silver light. Then the heavens fell on them. The lightning that covered the sky fell, arrows like rain of destructive lightning. The last thing that Vacuse remembered to do before his death was to curse himself for allowing himself to live such a useless life. And then to curse Drenvar for his betrayal. Then everything went blank. Chapter 2. At 6. Vacuse was dead. And then he wasn't. He gasped awake, one hand going to his chest and the other went up as if to stop the heavens from falling on him. His chest was tight from pain and fear. The dragon roasted us alive and wanted to eat us. It took a few seconds and a lot of blinking to realize that he wasn't dead and the pain he was feeling was an illusion. He sighed in relief and took a deep breath. He rubbed his face with his two hands. It was all a dream. Suddenly, he froze. 2 hands. And what the hell happened to his voice? Vacuse lost his left hand from the elbow down since he was a kid, chopped off in a single swing. It was one of the reasons he was terribly bullied and struggled all his life. Even people with 2 hands suffered, much less him. The sight of his 2 hands and the sound of his voice struck his mind like an arrow, and every realization clicked in his mind. I should be dead. I was killed. If the spear didn't kill, then the dragon would surely have done away with me. So how? His voice sounded like that of a kid, and he shuddered. Did the dragon cast some kind of spell? A special talent of it? Fear was beginning to settle in his mind because he remembered the stories of people that were turned on by unbound beasts and the terrifying things that were done to them, things that were worse than death. Vacuse took a deep breath. I need to calm down. First things first, I need to know where I am. He turned to look around. He was on a bed in a room that was lit with low light, and on his sides were 2 beds. Arranged all around the room were different beds with kids sleeping on them. This reminds me of my childhood. Wait, impossible. Vak. You sat up, eyes wide. He slid away from his bed, and he realized he was almost the same size as his bed. His heart began to beat fast. The last time he had 2 hands was when he was 6 years old. Without hesitation, he moved towards the wall in the corner, and he stood in front of the mirror. Absolute fuckery. Vacuse swore. The face that was staring back at him was that of a grunt kid with hollow eyes. His red eyes were haunted, his black hair like strings on his head. He couldn't believe it. I am 6 years old, Vacuse said, shock and surprise battling in his voice. He touched his face, feeling the bones beneath his thin flesh. His face was covered in bruises, blue and purple. Why am I so malnourished? Then he remembered. Drenvar didn't care about all the bastards that he had until they'd passed through the rite and shown their real potential as soul bearers. He treated them as nothing more than annoying pests that he had to deal with. And to make it worse, Vacuse was one of the smaller children, and he was always bullied, his food eaten while he only got to lick plates after. I really suffered, he muttered softly. Then his eyes hardened. But that was all in the past. Even the heavens will curse me if I let go of this opportunity to make something with my life. Dang, ding, dang. Just then, a sound shot through the room like a sharp blade cutting the air. It was the sound of a bell waking them. The children were used to such things, and they woke up, all of them between the age of 5 and 6, some with only a few days between them. Drenver was the worst of the worst bastards. He would time it and then spread his seed at the same time, impregnating multiple women so that the children would always come in batches. They didn't go to wash or anything. Instead, the children all rushed out of the building and ran down the hallway into the hall, where more children also poured from different hallways. Now they were mixed, both male and female. And Vacuse was among the unwashed bodies of the bastards of Vorrakyn. It was mealtime. It was the first thing they did when they woke up because after that, their time would be filled with training and working. Yes, Drenver didn't like hiring many servants and used his children. He did have a lot. Long tables, 5 of them, were arranged in the hall, and they all found a chair. They didn't sit. Instead, they stopped by the chair. Vacuse had gone through the same process until he bound his lesser beast and moved out of the dorm. Before, in the past, he would be feeling dread because mealtime might be what others were looking forward to, but for him, it was the time to get beaten. But now, his heart was beating fast. Then the servant that was responsible for their care entered. The man was bulky with red eyes of the Vorrakyn, one of the numerous bastards created by the former family head. He sneered, his lips curling with misery. Today, you will be given food and then you will learn about what it means to be a soul-bearer and a Vorrakyn. He raised his hand, and a soft blue light like condensed wind appeared. What it means to use the force. Everyone's eyes glittered because they knew what was coming. The first rite where all the bastards would be given equal chance together with the legitimate children of the Vorrakyn family. A chance that would set the foundation for all of them. Vacuse grinned. He was going to take full advantage of it. Chapter 3. Please bring your food here, your lapdog. Maya shouted. Each of the 5 tables had the biggest bully that acted as the boss, and they demanded how food would be shared. After his little speech, the head servant for their dorm had ordered them to be served food that was little more than vomit of watery green. And for his own table, Maya and her gang were the ones ruling. Don't you hear me? You'll get double the beating today, she snarled. They were the same age, but she was taller and sturdier, with arms 3 times the size of Vacuse's. Everyone at the table bent their heads and began to scoop food into their mouths like hungry dogs, afraid it would be snatched away the next instant. Only those Maya called stood up and moved toward her, their bowls in hand and their eyes down. Vacuse's mouth curled in disgust. He couldn't believe he had once been like that. A pathetic thing. He walked toward her, his eyes raised and steady. Time to start getting things into motion. I can't kill Drenver now, but I can still raise my standing in the house until I stand above everyone else. I can still influence things the way I want until I finally get rid of Drenver. I must raise the Vorrakyn family with my own hand. He reached her place and, one by one, Maya collected the bowls from the other children and poured them into a wooden bucket, leaving them with only a few spoonfuls. When it reached Vacuse's turn, she sneered. My lapdog. Her gang laughed and snickered. Vacuse turned toward them with a slight frown. He didn't remember any of their names or faces. They all likely died before they grew up in his past life. But Maya was different. She left a deeper scar in him than he expected. Before he had even grown, she had beaten him into submission and broken his will early. All his life he struggled and battled with it, trying his best to be more assertive instead of the submission that was carved into him. Well, bring your bowl here and sit on the floor beside me. I will give you your beating later, Maya waved. That was why she called Vacuse her lapdog. She would have him sit beside her and then throw him food. Vacuse shook his head. I was really trash. Maya's eyes flashed. What did you say? The whole table went quiet immediately and all the heads swung his way. What the other children liked best was to see someone get beaten. It was one of the bright spots of their day. Even the children from the other tables turned around. Isn't that Maya's dog? So he really can talk. I thought all he could do was cry. So pathetic. Maya should send him here for training. Maybe she can't control her table anymore. But what did he say? Vacuse held her eyes red against red as he repeated his words slowly and calmly, ignoring all the other voices. I was trash. Maya snorted, her cheek wobbling. She'd eaten her fair share of food and was one of the healthier children in the whole dorm. You have always been trash. Tell me when you haven't. You can't even protect your own food. You are nothing but a dog. The irony, Vacuse thought. All of them were dogs of Drenver. He moved closer to her. Yes, I am a dog. Then he slammed his plate on her face. Bam! The wooden plate shattered as it was rammed into her shocked face with such force that she was sent flying from her chair in a scattered heap. Vacuse raised his brows in mild surprise. He was only expecting to spill the food on her face, not send her flying back. His attack shouldn't be that powerful. At 6, he didn't have enough strength when he hadn't even learned to use the force. Instinctively, he mentally checked himself, his lower abdomen, and he sucked in a sharp breath in surprise. His soul space was at that advance already. It was just at the level it had been when he died, and then he had already hit the limit of what his body could handle. Although he didn't have the power to match the soul space yet, he still had the residue that his 6-year-old self could produce. Vacuse grinned. Everyone stared at him in surprise and admire. What the fuck? Life wasn't just some fairy tale where the hero gets power overnight. The children had tasted the cruel end of what the world could offer, and most things couldn't shock them anymore. But this, what the hell? Maya thought the same thing as she pulled herself to her feet. Her right eye was shut and swollen, and her face red, but the other eye still shone with cruelty. Vacuse grinned. Oh, you still want more. It seems you don't like it when dogs do what they do best. Biting. With that, he flew forward, faster than he should, faster than any student present should be capable of, and he was immediately in front of her. Maya flinched. Wait. Vacuse didn't wait. His hand flew forward and he slapped her so hard that a tooth flew out of her mouth with blood, and she was thrown to the ground again. The only sound in the room then was the clattering of a wooden spoon on the ground. Even the head servant stood up to watch, his eyes wide as he realized that Vacuse was using the force. Vacuse wasn't satisfied enough, so he went to her side and crouched beside her. Maya was crying at this point, snot and blood mixing together on her face. She looked up and flinched as she saw Vacuse's face. It was like looking at the face of a smiling demon. Fear filled her eyes. Please. Vacuse nodded and rubbed his chin. How many times did I say that word? Please. And yet you took my food. Let's just say I said the word 10 times. I will forgive you and only leave you with a light punishment. Hope entered her eyes. Thank you, Vacuse snickered. I will only make you say please 10 times. Chapter 4. To climb to the top, Vacuse had no qualms about beating children, even beating the hell out of them. So, because his soul is old, he shouldn't hold a grudge against children. Maybe if the realities were different, but as it is, the world is what it is, and a child will kill just as easily as a grown adult if given the chance. Vacuse's hand went forward, and he gripped her chubby hands, his own thin fingers clamping over hers. He smiled at her gently. It's going to be painful. She didn't have time to fully digest what he said when Vacuse snapped one of her fingers, the pinky. There was a short moment of silence when the only sound everyone heard was the snap that sounded like a twig breaking. And then, she screamed, a squeaking sound like a dying pig. She tried to jerk away from him, but Vacuse's grip was like steel. Please, play. Vacuse snapped two of her other fingers at once so hard that a splinter of bone sliced through her hand, and blood began to flow. She shouted even more, but then her eyes rolled in her head, and she fainted. So fast. A shame. And I was going to 10, he mumbled. Vacuse stood, and all the children flinched as one. Even all the other bosses looked away from him and down at their plates. They've seen bullying before, but what Vacuse just did was nothing they've seen before. It was pure cruelty, and it chilled them to the bones. Vacuse's mouth curled. Once, before, he was one of those cowering bastards. But never again. He kicked her body away and returned to his seat to sit, then he pointed at the other 4 bosses. You, and you, come here right now. All the children were staring at him, shifting in their seats. The bosses stood up immediately. They understood enough that a much stronger power was among them, and they didn't want to mess with him. Vacuse pointed at the table. Bring all your plates over. You guys were talking badly about me, right? You'll starve for today. One of them opened his mouth to complain or maybe agree, but Vacuse didn't wait to find out as he punched him so hard he spun before he fell on the ground. Just do as you're told. They did, giving him their food. All the food was disgusting, but it was all they had, and Vacuse needed to bring his body back from its malnourished state. Well, what are you bastards waiting for? Eat, he shouted. And all the other children began to eat, one eye on their food and the other on Vacuse, as if he might be beside them and punch them if they didn't keep their eyes on him. The other bosses stood behind his back, doing their best not to breathe too loudly. Up in his place, the head servant sneered. Would you look at that, turning his back to his enemies without a care. Seems we might have a slightly better bastard this time around. He turned to another servant. Hey, go check on that girl. If she's dead, you know what to do. This is a cruel place. In this world, there exists an invisible energy known simply as the Force, a primordial power that flows through all life but can only be harnessed by a rare few. Those born with the ability to tap into the Force gain superhuman abilities, enhanced strength, speed, resilience, and perception. These individuals are known as Force wielders or users, the head servant said. He raised his hand, and a small blue energy flickered above his palm. This is the most powerful humanity can reach. It was after their breakfast, and the tables and chairs had been cleared away while the children sat on the ground. If you can harness the Force, then you can be promised a good life as a soldier, or even become a retainer for a soul bearer. Vacuse nearly snorted. Maybe it was different in the other families, but in the Vorrakyn household, where strength is the only rule and law, Force users are glorified servants. The head servant leaned forward, and his eyes darkened. For your sake as children of the dragons, I hope you have the ability to use the Force because with that alone, your life will be better. Then I will tell you about the soul bearers. Among the Force wielders, a rarer subset transcends the natural limitations of the body, of being human. These are the soul bearers, individuals capable of forging pacts with legendary beings from other realms. When a pact is made, the soul bearer fuses a part of their Force with that of the creature. Soul bearers can only bond with a single entity, and such will determine their standing in the world. Vacuse nodded. In his past life, he only bound with a lesser beast, and that meant his standing in the family was far low on the ladder. The type of beast bound determines the type and level of power and potential of a soul bearer. He clenched his fist, and his eyes flashed. He could still remember the forbidden spell that killed him was about. This time, I will climb to the very top. The head servant's eyes shone. Each family of soul bearers has a pathway that's exclusive to them. Some guilds or associations have, as well. A pathway is a portal, a way that links to the world of such entities and where the soul bond will be made, and they will be drawn into your soul space. We, the Vorrakyn, have the only pathway of the dragons. We are the riders of ash that rule the sky. We have the pathway of the ancient beasts that can swallow the world, shatter the sea, and make the sky fall. We are the Vorrakyn. His words made everyone suck in a sharp breath, their hands clenched, and their blood boiling as if his words had called the dragon blood hidden in their blood. Even Vacuse was caught in it, more so as he'd seen one of those ancient beasts. He had felt the power, and he wanted nothing more to be one of those legendary riders that made the Vorrakyn the most powerful house in the Asgarat Empire at one time. He took a deep breath. But then, this is a new chapter for me. My previous life is meaningless, but this time, I will raise the house to greatness and rule the sky. The head servant nodded in satisfaction at the effect his words had. He snapped his fingers. And that is why you are all made, to help the house leader to raise the house to the height it was once. Suddenly, everyone was caught in it, to be the one to raise the house and stand in the sky above everyone. But the head servant and Vacuse knew how cruel those really ties were. Chapter 5. Blood Hearts. From that day forward, the head servant began to teach them how to use the Force. Using the Force is the basic thing for all soul bearers, but it is something big and unique for ordinary humans. They would wake up in the morning, and the head servant would serve them food. Afterwards, it would be training the Force from morning until night. It was a boring subject for the 6-year-old Vacuse. The Force itself does not give that much power. It is basically to enhance the body. But then, before the era of pathways and soul bearers, Force users dominated the world. But Vacuse did not just relax because using force was something he could do in his dreams. Instead, he even worked harder. There was a technique he found out years later, but it was already too late for him. It is the technique of forcing the force into the bones to make them stronger. Adults could not use it because their bones had already formed, but for a kid like Vacuse, it was the best way to spend his time. While others were forcing their bodies to produce the force and enhance their physical attributes, Vacuse was forcing it into his own bones. A painful process that would leave him soaking in sweat and sometimes make his nose bleed. It left him turning in his bed, but the thought of squeezing his father's neck and the idea of ruling the house kept him going. It might seem like a little gain, but when two powerful equals meet, then it is the little things like that that would decide how the fight would go. Vacuse also felt satisfaction that he did not feel in his past life because he dominated the whole dome. There were no more bosses, as he was the single one that stood above them. It was petty, but Vacuse did not care. What is the use of a second chance at life if he will not do what he did not do in his past one? He did not let it get to his head, though. He knew just how much of a frog in the well he was. Today will be your last day in this dome and your last food here. I must commend you all. You have more potential than the last batch, the head servant said, his eyes turning to Vacuse as he said the last word. The head servant waved his hand as he continued. Today, you will be given meat, and you will bathe, scrubbed clean, as you will be meeting the house head. And suddenly, the head servant jerked back as he stared in Vacuse's direction, as if he had been stung by something. Just a second ago, he felt an intense wave of bloodlust. But surely he was mistaken. Vacuse's hand was clenched tight, and his jaws were gritted. He would be meeting his murderer. The one that killed him. His blood seemed to have been set on fire, and he wanted nothing more than to stand up and inflict his revenge right back. But he calmed himself. If he should behave rashly, then his death would be even more useless than the last time. He took a deep breath. The head servant continued. You will be performing the first rite that will prepare for the second rite, where you will be bound with a dragon or dragonkin. The dragon pathway has the dragon and all the dragonkin, like the drake, dragonet, and such. The head servant shook his head. I will give you a warning. Once the rite of the blood hearts begins, I advise you to immediately know your place, or else. He did not say any more. The thing was, the dome that Vacuse was in was not the only dome for Drenvar's bastards. There are other domes, and all of them will be competing together. Even the two children that are legitimate will join them as well. In the last blood heart rite, Vacuse did not reach the blood tree. The rite is just that all of them would be thrown into the wilderness that is in the Vorrakyns territory, and the first set of people to get to the blood tree at the center and eat from the blood fruits would pass to learn of the dragon pathway. The blood heart fruits are herbal fruits that were said to be planted by a blood dragon once. The effects of eating them would make the soul space expand. The blood fruit is one of the remaining precious treasures of the Vorrakyn. It is also one of the ways the house is financing itself. As such, the fruits on the tree cannot even be enough for 20 people out of about 200 bastards. The blood heart rite is called so because everyone would turn against each other to reach the fruits. After giving his explanation, and after they ate, the head servant led them towards the bathing areas, where they were scrubbed clean by servants and then given robes of red and white with the dragon wings of the Vorrakyn on them. After that, they were led to the main hall, where they were to wait for the arrival of the family head. They were given short blades that would fit into their small hands, real swords. All their training must be put to use. Vacuse stared at the sword. He cannot kill Drenvar now. But taking revenge is not his only goal. He also wanted to rule and build House Vorrakyn to stand beside and higher than all the other great houses in the empire. So for that, he must use Drenvar until he was powerful enough to kill him. That means he must draw his attention. One thing that Drenvar and all the other members of the house have in common is the idea that strength rules all. Vacuse must draw and hold Drenvar's attention. He must become a being that stands above all his children. He must be made the heir. Using the rules of the house that he learned since his past life, Vacuse turned to the head servant. Since the day breaks, it is already the start of the blood heart rite, right? The head servant suddenly felt uneasy, but he still answered. Yes. In the past, we began to attack each other once day breaks. Vacuse nodded, and then he bowed to the head servant. Thank you. Then he drew his sword. Chapter 6. What do we have here? This is the last dom, your grace, one of the knights of House Vorrakyn said. He wore light steel armor of red and white, with his chest decorated with the spread wings of the dragon. 4 of them followed Drenwar Vorrakyn. Drenwar is a tall man with a dead face. There was no emotion on his face, not even coldness. His red eyes were sharp like the edge of a blade. He wore a robe of the Vorrakyn's colors and walked with the casual confidence of someone assured of their powers in their domain. On his neck hung a chain with the head of a dragon. None of the children are impressive, he said dryly. Someone was following behind him, a female dressed the same way. She shrugged. I can point to 1 or 2. She is Kya Vorrakyn, Drenwar's sister and one of the commanders of the Vorrakyn family. Drenwar narrowed his eyes. They lack the ruthlessness that a child of the dragon should have. Maybe we can salvage 1% of the 100%. They also don't have a strong command of the force. His hand tightened as he spoke, and a faint dark red aura briefly covered him. His shadows twisted. Before returning to normal, we need to find another way, Skya. This method isn't working. I'm just creating trash every batch. Then it is good you had your children 6 years ago in the same batch. They're promising, right? Also, the 2 can already shape the force as if they've been doing it for 20 years. Also, their soul space is already impressive. We might really hit it this time and bring forth an S rank, one of the dragons. The gleam in Drenwar's eyes sharpened. Indeed, the 2 children now carry the hope of the family. Drenwar himself is already bound to an A-rank dragonkin, Vywin, and that alone made him the strongest in the house. Combined with his advancement stage, his strength is undeniable. The 2 children that were born to the wife he married are the true children of the House Vorrakyn. Suddenly, Drenwar stiffened, and seconds later, the others stiffened as well. Blood. They could smell blood. The knights all surrounded Drenwar, their hands on their weapons as if they could protect him against something that could actually prove a threat to the family head. This dom, do we have an intruder in my place? Drenwar asked. He didn't seem particularly bothered and continued to walk forward unhurried. Skya shook her head. There shouldn't be, but the smell of blood is too thick. Something must be wrong. Drenwar grunted. The knights hurried forward. 2 of them stood in front of the door, and their bodies were covered in ruddy energy. They raised their feet and kicked the door in, blowing it away from its hinges, sending splinters flying. They rushed in, and a second later, one of them rushed right back and shook his head. His face was filled with confusion. There are no intruders here, Your Grace. Drenwar didn't say anything as he continued to stride forward. When he got to the door, one of the knights announced him. Hail, Drenwar Vorrakyn, Dragon Lord of the Vorrakyn, Lord of Kragthar and the surrounding cities, Grand Duke of the Western region. The Vorrakyn hold the title of the Grand Duke of the West. It's a title that should mean they control the western part of the empire, but that's just a title left from when they were great. They barely managed to survive in their own territory, and all their lands were sold away when they couldn't manage them with their own power. There are rumors that the emperor is even considering taking the title from them and giving it to one of the western dukes. The only thing still stopping them is the fact that the Vorrakyn family was one of the founding fathers of the empire and helped carve it out from the warring continent, and the thin silver hope that they might still yet bring forth a dragon. Maybe even a weak dragon. As it is, though, everyone's waiting for Drenwar's children to bond with a dragon. Even the family's enemies were still wary of the possibility. Because it is a known fact that the Vorrakyn family would either end with Drenwar's generation and his heir. That was why anytime Drenwar heard the title, he always clenched his fist, his eyes hardening. Everyone in the room, including Skya, bowed. But Drenwar was only looking at the room. What is going on here? Head servant, what is this disrespect? Just then, Drenwar felt a flash of heat against him, and his body reacted before he even thought about it. A burst of energy exploded from him with such force that those around him were thrown away. His body twisted and morphed in a blink. Claws came from his hand, and scales ripped above his skin. His eyes turned slitted, and his hands grew longer. The aura that came from him was so strong and potent that everyone in the room fell to their knees. Almost all the children fainted. A partial shift. As an ascended, Drenver could do a full shift, but the bloodlust he felt didn't call for it. A low growl came from his mouth as he slowly turned, looking for the source of the threat that forced a partial shift. He didn't find any. So what did he feel that made him feel threatened? He felt an intent of death. Lord Drenver, what's wrong? Skya said as she picked herself up from the ground. Drenver didn't answer. He'd spent so much of his life fighting that he recognized when someone wanted him dead before they even showed their blades. His eyes swung around again, and he zeroed in on an odd thing in the room. One of the children was standing. That alone shocked Drenver into changing back into his human form. His shadow twisted, and glowing yellow eyes appeared in it. Calm down, it is nothing. The eyes disappeared, and Drenver walked towards the boy. What do we have here? Chapter 7. An animal. What do we have here? Drenver asked as he loomed over Vacuse, a red aura rippling around them, sending their robes fluttering. Vacuse stared up at his father and wanted to jump and bury his sword in the man's throat. But he held himself back because he would be dead before he even reached the man. He had mistakenly let his bloodlust loose the other time, and Drenver had reacted quite sharply to it. He bowed his head. My name is Vacuse, Your Grace. Drenver stared at him for a while, and the pressure coming from him increased. The air turned thick and heavy, coiling around Vacuse's limbs like a weight. Vacuse, why are you still standing? Vacuse blinked in surprise. He didn't understand what Drenver was saying. He thought the man had found out about his bloodlust intent earlier, but he was asking a completely different question. Why am I still standing? Yes, you are a child, and yet you are withstanding the aura pressure. You are standing the domination from a soul-bearer. Drenver's eyes glittered as if he'd suddenly found a gem among trash. Vacuse wasn't even thinking about that. How much pressure and dominance had he withstood in his past life? And after going back and restarting his life, that seemed to have increased his mental attributes to a higher level. Drenver straightened, and the aura around him vanished. He looked around. On one side of the room appeared children that seemed to have been beaten to near death. There were even sword marks on some of their bodies. And on the other side were children that were kneeling, their swords discarded in a heap. What happened here? Drenver asked again. The head servant hurried forward, his hands twisting together. He fell to his knees. Your Grace, it is the child. Vacuse, he fought all of the children this morning and maimed more than half of them and made the others surrender to him. Ah, Drenver said, and his eyes turned back to Vacuse. You did this. Vacuse's face was calm and composed, and he nodded. I did. Drenver grinned, an ugly grin, and the energy around him turned chaotic. His aura pressure appeared once more, but much stronger and potent. It surged toward Vacuse and stabbed into him like dozens of swords. Vacuse froze. His eyes went wide. He tried to resist it, but it was more powerful than he could handle. And he fell to his knees, his face blank and his muscles slack. Drenver took a step forward and loomed over him once more. Look at this bastard, he's still holding onto his sword. He withdrew his aura, and his hand went down to grip Vacuse's hair, lifting him up with it until they were eye to eye. They stared at each other. Red against red. Vacuse's heart began to beat fast, the pain from his head made his hand twitch, and he nearly brought his hand up in a slash. Drenver narrowed his eyes. Are you looking for my attention, boy? Is that why you did it? Disrupting my rules because you want to show off. The veins on Vacuse's head were throbbing, and the flesh pulled taut. It was so painful, but he gritted his teeth to show no pain. And he answered the question. I did it because I could. They were too weak to fight me. Drenver's hand tightened, and Vacuse bit back a wince of pain. About the rules, I only follow the lore of the Vorrakyn. Once the day breaks, the rite of the blood hearts already starts. Drenver stared at Vacuse for a long time. Vacuse could barely breathe. Drenver wanted to find someone that would carry on his dream, but only someone he could control. He'd kill talents that seemed troublesome to him. He's a selfish bastard like that. Vacuse's heart was beating fast. Because Drenver might just kill him because he behaved in a rebellious manner. His hand tightened on his hair as if he was seconds away from ripping it from his head. Eventually, he snorted and threw him away, snorting. It seems we have an attention-seeking whore here. Vacuse gripped his head. Warm, red liquid trickled down his scalp, and some of his hair had come loose. He lowered his head to hide the hatred that bubbled in his eyes. One day, Drenver, and I'll have your head in my hand. Drenver looked around and scowled. The rest of them will become the servants of the house. Pick some good ones among them to be trained as guards. They can't even make it to the right. Then he looked at Vacuse. You, boy. Come with me. Kraktar was the ancient city of the Vorrakyn. It was where their territory began and where they built their power back in the day. And now it is the only city that's under their direct control. All the other towns they have are slowly being taken over by others. The city was big and sprawled like a sleeping beast curling around its treasure, the Kraktar castle. It was built in the center of the city. A majestic castle with tall pillars and the intimidating statues of dragons and their kin decorating the whole place. Knights stood at attention at all corners, ready for action. Go on, eat up, Drenver said. Inside the castle in the dining area, Drenver sat at the head of the table, and beside him sat his 2 children, also 6, and on the other end sat Vacuse. On the other side sat Skya and some of the other members, including the mother of the twins, Drenver's wife. Vacuse stared at the food and tried to determine if it was poisoned, but he soon gave up as his mouth watered, and he dug in, eating without restraint. Suddenly, he stopped and looked up with his mouth full. Everyone was looking at him, and most of their faces were filled with disgust. An animal is sitting at our table. Chapter 8. The beast at the table. Vacuse blinked. The one who spoke was none other than Zephyr Vorrakyn, the so-called legitimate son of the dragon. Drenver's children are twins, a boy and a girl. And their characters are as nasty as their fathers, but at least Lyra was better. She didn't try to kill Vacuse, fail, and cut his hand from the elbow instead. Yes, Zephyr Vorrakyn was the one who cut his hand in the previous life during the blood heart rite. Vacuse frowned. He didn't feel as much anger as he felt when he looked at their father. The blood rite is a competition of deaths, and they're expected to kill each other. Vacuse was simply weaker then. That was why he lost his hand. But another wave of anger shone in his eyes. It made his eyes light up, and when he smiled, he indeed looked like an animal, a wild one. A beast. Zephyr was responsible for catching the sacrifice and pinning them on the magical formation. He was with his father when they betrayed him. That wasn't fair, and Vacuse would meet his vengeance on the son, same as the father. He lifted the knife he was using and pointed it straight at Zephyr. The whole table quieted down immediately. What he was doing was inappropriate, but he didn't care, and he loved the shock on Zephyr's face and his mother's. They turned to Drenver, but he pretended as if he didn't see what was happening. Vacuse understood what Drenver was playing at. He wanted to use Vacuse as a hook, a bait to make the twins fight harder. Admittedly, the twins were good enough, and even in their past life, they were able to bind A-ranked beasts like their father. He did the same thing in his previous life, took a bastard girl, then treated her well and let her disrespect his children, thereby creating a competitive environment. The last time, the girl was the first to die, and she was killed by Lyra. Vacuse played along with Drenver. You spoiled brat, I will deal with you during the rite. Zephyr's face turned red immediately, and his eyes flashed with anger. He opened his mouth to speak, but Vacuse didn't give him the chance. He turned to their mother and smiled softly. My lady, the food is the most delicious. She smiled back in return, her face warm. Oh, it's been a while since I've been complimented about the food I bring to the table. It was made by my chef. I will pass the compliment along. Vacuse drew attention away from Zephyr, and the boy all but began to spew fire from his mouth. Even Lyra stopped eating to look at Vacuse. Everyone noticed what he did, and they took note. He first behaved like a fool to draw Zephyr into a conflict and then quickly turned attention from him as if he didn't matter. A cunning beast has joined their table. Everyone in the room was potentially dangerous, and so was Isolde Vorrakyn. Originally Isolde Vetra from one of the few human noble families. The Vorrakyn family would marry like that so as not to introduce another beast family into their own. Maybe that was one of the reasons nobody suspected she was a spy, planted since marriage and holding no love for her husband or children. She was one of the reasons House Vorrakyn fell and what forced Drenver to use the forbidden technique. Vacuse nodded and cut his food as it should be in a noble house, with fork and knife. His earlier display was a ruse. Suddenly, Lyra stopped eating and smiled at him. Brother, do you know the significance of the food on the blood right day? Zephyr whirled on his sister. She was taking the side of the barbarian over him. And calling him brother. Vacuse looked at her. Of all the Vorrakyn family members, he was most wary of her because he didn't know what she wanted. She appeared calm and reasonable on the surface, but she was ruthless and scheming. In the past life, she was all but named the heir of the Vorrakyn. Already, she controlled the surrounding towns, and her spy network was rumored to spread throughout the entire empire. Vacuse nodded. It's the mark of what might be the last meal with the family. She smiled and nodded. Before, the blood rite was open to all the children of the lords under the Vorrakyn, and so a lot of families usually lost their children. Vacuse nodded. Now, the only thing those lords get are incomplete pathways. They could only bind to a rank A beast. For the rest of the meal, every other person at the table was quiet as Vacuse and Lyra made small talk. Only Zephyr glared daggers at Vacuse, seething. Vacuse smiled at him now and then. Later in the day, they were taken to the wilderness where the blood heart rite would take place. Kraktar was at the far edge of the empire, right at the border and next to the warring barbarians. So, not only does the Vorrakyn have to preserve their family, they have to protect against the invasion of the barbarians. At least the barbarians are not as aggressive as they were in previous hundreds of years. Mostly due to the high-level dungeon that spawned between them in the wilderness of the border. But that just means that the Vorrakyn have to keep fighting the monsters that spilled over. They have different outposts in the wilderness, and one of the strongest outposts there was one that was created to protect the blood fruits. The bastards were loaded in large carts that were bigger than the average houses, pulled by soul-bearers that manifested their beasts, dragonettes, E-ranked beasts. But for Vacuse, he followed Drenwar's family in their fancy carriage that was pulled by majestic flesh-eating horses that ran in the wilderness as if they were wolves. Chapter 9. The outpost was built around the Bloodheart tree, not as if there were fences around, camping a portion of the wilderness, but formations were set in different parts, creating a tightly sealed shield that wrapped around the place and completely cut it off from the wilderness. The outpost itself was built as an arena, and already different people from Kraktar were arriving, nobles under House Vorrakyn with their children. Although they could not participate, they were still there for the show. The bastards were marched into the arena, over 200 children between the ages of 7 and 6, all of them wearing white robes with their red eyes glittering. Vacuse followed beside Drenwar as he walked to the special throne built at the top of the arena, on a raised platform specifically made for him. Drenwar sat down, and his family members arranged themselves at the platform below his feet. Including Vacuse, he sat beside Lyra. The family head began to speak, his voice echoing across the entire arena. Welcome to the new batch of the Vorrakyn blood heart rites and the final bath for my generation. The fact that Drenwar and the Vorrakyn family were looking for a prodigy was not a hidden fact. In fact, people joked about it behind their backs and called them the family of bastards and that their family heads were always stallions. You all know what this is about, so I will not go into details. Make your way to the blood fruits and get your hands on at least one of them. It will be the thing that will determine your future. There are few things in the world that could expand the soul space of a soul bearer, but the blood fruits are one of them. Although Vacuse's soul space was already advanced due to his past life and death, he still wanted to get his hands on all the opportunities he could reach because, this time, he was aiming for the top. His goal was to at least be able to bond with an A-ranked beast, and with the help of the forbidden technique that he knew in his past life, it was something achievable. Drenwar continued, use any opportunity to get your hands on it. There is nothing like cheating once it has started. There is nothing like unfairness. Everything is fair once you go in. Monsters will be introduced into the outpost wilderness, and there will be no interference. You do not need luck, your strength will speak for you. And that was that. The spectators settled in their chairs as projections rose into the air, showing different sections of the wilderness outpost. The chill. Dren were then led out of the arena and into the wilderness to await the signal. Vacuse and the twins also joined the other children, but immediately it was like oil and water. The eyes that turned toward Vacuse and the twins were as venomous as a snake, but even more cautious. There was a slight pause, as if something might happen. Tension coiled the air like a serpent. Vacuse's hand went to his sword, but in the end, it was Zephyr who stepped forward. He snorted and took several steps toward the bastards. Well, I am stronger than your lot, but I do not want your yapping behind me when I am fighting tough monsters. So, those of you strong ones who want to join forces with me should come forward now before it is too late, and I promise to at least share 2 fruits among you all. That immediately changed the atmosphere as the children looked at each other. It was not a bluff when Zephyr said he was strong. He was born a mild prodigy, a very low one, and he had been training since he drew breath. Among the children, there were many who wanted to join him, but Zephyr was not done. He raised his hand. I want 20 of you. Just like in his past life, Vacuse watched as a brief but bloody fight happened, followed by 4 bodies dropping lifeless to the ground, and 20 bastards joined Zephyr. In his past life, the 20 children became lifelong followers of Zephyr, and they helped the asshole commit all the things that he did, including cutting off his hand and then other humiliating bullying that followed before eventually choosing him as a sacrifice. Vacuse did not let his anger consume him as he turned to Lyra. Are you not going to form a faction of your own? Lyra carried a long sword that was almost as tall as her, compared to the short swords that everyone had. Many people might not know it with her cute and innocent face, but Vacuse knew that the girl was born with abnormal strength and was the strongest of the 2 twins. For some reason, she also preferred to fight in the background. But when she did fight, it was to totally destroy her opponent. She shook her head. I lack the leadership my brother has. It is better for me to fight alone. Then she smiled. Although it is said that the blood tree is at the center, it is not that easy. It is not something that can be reached just by rushing head on. Also, you should be careful of my brother. He does not seem to like you. Vacuse nodded. Thank you. The signal came in a burst of fire that lit up the sky, and the children rushed into the wilderness. Vacuse did not rush. There was no reason to. The distance between the starting point and the blood tree could not be crossed like that, and just running would not get them anywhere. He began to walk calmly toward the wilderness with Lyra behind him. Suddenly, he whirled, and his sword slashed up and smashed into the sword that was trailing a downward arc at his head. Bam! The 2 swords collided, and sparks flew in the air. The sword above his head pressed down hard, but Vacuse easily held it back with one hand. He smiled. The snake finally showed her fangs. Chapter 10. Useful or useless? Lyra flashed her teeth in a smile, her whole face lit up as if in joy of what she was about to do. A snake. I thought we are all children of the dragon. With her great strength, she leaned on her sword and pushed, her 2 hands gripping firmly. Faint blue smoke that looked like evaporated sweat covered her. Vacuse felt her strength. His own sword was forced back slowly towards his face. He was calm, and he also used the force, covering his right hand in faint energy. But you think you are more of a child of a dragon than anyone else. In his past life, Lyra was also responsible for killing the people that their father used as competition. Her eyes sparked. On the contrary, all of us, the bastards, are all entitled to sit on the throne of the dragon. But they are all trash. You, on the other hand, Vacuse, are a clear threat. You need to die. Sometimes Vacuse, in his past life, wondered where the cruelty of all Vorrakyn came from, and he realized it was bred into them like a tiny snake since birth, growing with them. And he was no exception. Vacuse reached into himself and pulled more force from his body. His body was instantly covered in a glow, and with a push, he sent her reeling back. But you cannot kill me. You are not strong enough. Her eyes sparked. You are a fool. You think I will attack you without having the confidence to kill you. I only go after things I can crush. Then why have you not killed your brother? He is useful. He is a nice figurehead. And who do you think will do the breeding for the next generation? Vacuse shook his head. Lyra was even more dangerous than he thought. Thinking about it now, in the past life, she did not seem to hold an apparently powerful position, but somehow she was able to move things as she wished. Is that so? Fortunately, that practice will end with Drenver. She frowned. What are you talking about? Do you honestly turn your eyes to the position of the family head? Vacuse shrugged and turned, his sword lowered. I am just like you in some ways. I only go after what is useful, and you can still stay breathing for now. The reason he did not want to kill her was because she was a spider in the spy network in the future. It was something he needed if his plans were to take shape. Him turning was intentional, but she counted it as a mistake she would not let him regret. All the force in her body disappeared at once and appeared on her sword. And without hesitation, she swung it. It was called the Force Strike, and only the best of the best Force users could use it, something that could be called their ultimate technique. It was not something that a 6-year-old should be using. The fact shocked everyone sitting in the arena, and they were already congratulating Drenver for having such a child, not minding that someone was about to die. But Vacuse faced the slash of energy calmly, his own weapon raised, and he swung his sword 3 times in 1 second. 3 slashes blasted out. One met the opponent's attack and cancelled it in a blast of shockwave. One continued, and the edge sliced a clean wound on Lyra's cheek, while the last struck her sword so hard her hand went numb, and she dropped it. What followed was shock and silence. Lyra doing only 1 was already impressive, but 3 force strikes. Was that even possible? In the arena, the people murmured, and Drenver gripped the edge of his throne, his eyes tight. Is he going to kill her? Lyra had fallen to her knees, her eyes blank. Her hand went to her stinging cheek. How? Vacuse loomed over her, and murderous intent came from him, suffocating her, but for all that, he looked down at her calmly, which sent a chill through her heart. Lyra thought of herself as a predator that stalked the darkness and killed her prey from behind without them knowing. She thought of herself as a plotter, the string puller. But right then, she realized that it meant little when the one she was facing was much stronger than her. Please, you better find a way to be, and then continue to be, useful to me, Lyra Vorrakyn. Once the day comes that you become useless, I will kill you. The message was delivered with such calm and vastness that it hit her like a cold stone. Lyra believed him instantly, and she nodded. Understood. Vacuse did not say anything as he turned and disappeared into the wilderness. Lyra knelt there for a long time, before she picked herself up. A beast, a monster in the house. Vacuse walked a little in the wilderness. He seemed to be deep in thought. My objective here is the blood fruits. I will use this chance, where all nobles are gathered, to show them that I am the heir of the family. There must be no mistake about this. There is no reason to play about my intentions for things. Vacuse smiled. His left hand throbbed as if in memory of what happened to it in its past life. I must take care of some trash before I go after the fruits. He covered his legs with the force, and with a single step, he was dozens of steps forward in the shadowed forest. Before long, he began to run fast, his nose in the air as if he was sniffing something. What he was sniffing was indeed blood. He had picked the direction where Zephyr's team had run to and chased after them while he smelled for blood. He knew that Zephyr wanted to show off to the nobles as well, and he would kill a lot of monsters to show how powerful he was. Before long, he caught the thick smell of iron in the air. There you are.